What is up, Mets fans? We are back here for episode number 32 of the Mets'd podcast. Of course, I'm one of your co-hosts, Draftneck Marc. Marc Luino here with James Shiano. Jeter had no range. We normally talk about every single Mets series that's going on, but right now we're in between. We're in the All-Star break. Figured it'd be a great time to go over some of the All-Star break content, a little mid-season report. We got the home run derby with Pete Alonso. We got the All-Star game with Taijuan Walker. We got Alvarez and Brett Baty in the Futures game. We got prospect reports. We got the MLB draft. There's a lot of exciting things to talk about, maybe even a little trade deadline sprinkling in there because that's coming soon. So we have a lot of things that are not necessarily Mets baseball games to talk about, but still involve that New York Mets organization that we all watch and love and ride with every single day. So, James, happy to bring you back here. Oh, I didn't do the intro. Let's do the intro.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're the introductions twice in a row.
It's twice in a row. You know what it is? It's like we played the Pirates. We didn't have any games. I'm a little off my game here. I'm wearing a hat because I don't have any gel. I left it at the wedding this weekend. Here's the intro you guys were waiting for. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Mets'd. We're doing great stuff over there, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel, Mets'd Podcast. And if you're listening to us, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating. Drop us a review. It really does help out. I've seen the ratings and reviews have been going up every single episode. So I guess when I'm doing this little call to action, it's working. Thank you guys. Do appreciate it. Now I can bring James in again for his intro.
What's up, Mark? I'm chilling. It's been a really relaxing week with no games going on. Nothing really to watch every night. Besides like the All-Star game, but like, I don't know. At this point in our lives, like, who cares about the All-Star game?
Yeah, especially when Taijuan Walker was the only guy. Like, if DeGrom was pitching, I think we all would be a lot more hyped. I was happy.
Yeah,
I was happy
definitely.
Taijuan was in it. But it doesn't draw the same reaction as when Jacob DeGrom's on the mound to watch him pitch against some of the best players in the world.
Definitely. Also, just the way the All-Star game is run. Not saying it's a bad thing, because I want everyone who goes to the game to have their chance to shine, but after the third inning, like, you're getting Omar Narvaez versus Andrew Kittredge, and then our guy Taijuan Walker against Mike Zunino. Like, these aren't the types of at-bats I remember when I was like a kid. These aren't the types of at-bats we get in the first couple of innings when Vlad Guerrero hits a home run off Corbin Burns. Like, there are the stars, and then there are just the guys who were at the All-Star game. Well, that's fine. Yeah. I want them to get their shine, but
it was a particularly bad year for stars, I feel like, this year, like in the first half. Like, I mean, you can just even go like team by team. Like, Lindor didn't have a good first half for the Mets. Acuna got hurt, so that's another guy that you're missing. The guys on the Cubs who you normally think of, like Rizzo and Baez, weren't able to be there. There was a lot of dudes that were missing from these All-Star games that usually are, big parts of it. It was a little underwhelming, to say the least. The game was a game that I watched. It was nothing more than that.
Yeah, and I think that is all of this, a game that you watch. On the other hand, the home run derby encapsulated me. What an evening of excitement, vigor that was. Our guy Pete Alonso, as we both predicted it. Actually, did you predict it?
No, I said Shohei. Yeah. I couldn't be more wrong, which is just advice for you guys. If you ever hear me make a prediction, just go the other way.
Shohei did. I thought that people were kind of shitting on him a little too much for his performance. He did, I think, hit at least like 6 or 7 home runs of at least 500 feet, which was the most of anyone in the competition. I was still impressed by what he did. He's just the guy's so tired. He's the hardest working man in professional baseball. It's unbelievable to think about the things he does on a day in, day out basis. And you throw the home run derby on top of that, facing Juan Soto, actively the most underrated player in baseball, the childish Bambino, as that nickname has made its rounds again in the last couple of days since it was named on ESPN. Still a great show all around.
Yeah, and Ohtani also had the unfortunate thing of going up against Soto, who in the overtime round went 3 for 3 on 3 pitches. Like, that's so hard to do in a home run derby like that, especially when you're gassed like Ohtani was. It just wasn't meant to be. But Pete stole the show, like you said. Mm-hmm. I was at the wedding, so I couldn't actually watch it live. I've watched it over now that it's all been said and done. But when you just sent me the message like Pete won, oh my God, I was like, no friggin' way did he win it again. The way that the home run derby works, like being the second hitter, being the guy with the higher seed is such an advantage. And for Pete, on paper, it seemed like he was going to have to play behind all night, but Soto winning against Ohtani was huge because then Pete only had to beat Soto by 1. He got some help there, but hey, Pete still did it. Pete still won, and he had a crazy comeback against Trey Mancini in that last round. I saw it was like 30 seconds left, and he was down 10.
I don't think it was that much. Truthfully, watching it live, it didn't feel like there was even like a shtickle of competition for Pete the entire night. It didn't seem like there was a moment where he wasn't going to win, especially after Ohtani wasn't eliminated. And Pete also, it's funny that you mentioned like going second is such an advantage. He talked about how much he wanted to go first and how happy he was to be going first in the opening round against Salvador Perez. He was like, I want to set the standard. I want to set the bar. I know I can hit more home runs than every guy on the field right now. And he said, I know I'm the best power hitter in baseball. So he was actually very excited to go first. But I agree with you. If going second, especially in the head-to-head round, seems like a breeze. And it turned out to be a breeze in the second round when he beat Soto, because he had like a minute and a half left when it was all said and done. And you get to just kind of chill, save those home runs for the next at-bat.
Yeah, and I think this also is going to bring us into a little conversation that me and you had a little bit earlier this week, because you talk about Pete wanting to go first. He thought that was an advantage. We also heard Rob Manfred go at like a meeting. I don't know who it was with the baseball writers or whoever it was, talking about the extra inning rules and the runner on second and all this, which brought up a conversation with me and you about whether or not you want to be the road team in the extra inning rules the way it currently is in baseball. And me and you both agree that you want to be the team that hits first. And it's very similar to what happened in soccer recently, which we're getting real crazy here with this crossover. But when you're talking PKs, the team that goes first, I think, has a better statistical chance to win the game than the team that goes second, because you're almost always playing from behind in PKs. And that's what it feels like with extra innings. I know you were getting into some arguments you said with people about it.
Dude, my argument went into the hours of this morning. It's been like a 37-hour argument at this point. It's so ridiculous to me that someone thinks that, and this person, you know him too, his name is Eric. Like, he just loves to argue, and he's always wrong about things. It was very difficult for me to find statistics of how much of an advantage it is, because on Baseball Reference, Fangraphs, and Baseball Savant alike, you can't separate for innings and extra innings. You can only separate for extra innings rather than 1 through 9. So it's not like the greatest data set, especially because I only was able to find data of like how many average runs the home team scores versus the road team, and just the home team can only win by 1, so they're always going to have less runs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than the road team. So I just don't think that total runs is like the best measure of success in this, but I'm pulling it up right now. I wrote it on like the notes of an article I'm writing for Pitcher List that's coming out on Monday, but I just like put it in because like I want to keep these stats for just in case I need them. The road teams on average are scoring 2.6 runs per extra inning game, and the home team's 1.9. It just seems to me so clear that if you're the road team and you have the first shot to literally bury a game, you have the advantage, especially based on the modern baseball tenement that if you are the home team, you're burning your closer in the 9th, which I think probably should change if this extra inning rule plays, because I'd want to say, but I don't know if you're going to be tied or not. In a tie game, generally a baseball team is burning their closer in the 9th inning. So that means that the road team is going out there against not a closer the next inning. And the road team, presumably, we're assuming in most baseball games, will still have their closer when the home team comes to bat, no matter what happens in the top of the 10th or the 11th, whatever. I think it's clear as day that the road team has advantage. I can't believe you brought that up. That's so weird. We haven't even talked about it since then.
Yeah, no, I'm like totally about that. But you bringing it up about Pete saying he wanted to hit first so that he could like basically set the tone. It's like the same thing with the extra innings, like which comes back to that conversation, which is why I thought of it. And yeah, Pete set the tone with the home run derby.
He did that with Salvador Perez in the first round. Pete went out there and hit 35 home runs. The first four hitters, Mancini, Olsen, Story, and Gallo, the most disappointing player of the night. I bet on Joey Gallo just because I liked his odds. Oh my god!
I could have told you that Joey Gallo got nothing because that dude's not a competitor unless
you
that game.
You should have told me that.
Well, here's the thing, because you know what, he did like the MLB The Show tournament last year too. The guy just goes through the motions unless it's like actually matters. He's a very much go through the motions kind of guy from what I get the feel with. And home run derby for me, he didn't bring it. He didn't bring it at all.
He didn't bring it at all, but those guys all put together like rounds in the mid-20s, and everyone's like, wow, this is pretty good, because that's more than most home run derbies, and Pete walked out there and just walloped 35 home runs. He was hitting multiple, like, over 475 feet. Like, if they actually gave those bonus, honestly, Pete would have had, like, 13 minutes to hit home runs. He would have cleared 100. Wasn't even fair. And Salvador Perez walked up at the next turn and hit, like, either 28 or 29.
Which is unfortunate, because that's a killer round.
Literally, if they would have had the old school home run derby rules, the last 4 guys who went all would have moved on, and Mancini, Story, Olsen, and Gallo would have been eliminated, with Salvi, Pete, Soto, and Ohtani moving on, which would have made for a much more eventful Final Four. But doesn't matter. Pete is the undisputed home run king. He is a literal legend of the home run derby, 3rd player of all time to win the event multiple times. Dave Joust is an absolute hero.
So
the
good.
greatest batting practice pitcher of all time. My goodness gracious, that was sensational.
He wasn't getting the sliders that who pitched to him the last time? Was this like high school coach?
His cousin.
His cousin, yeah, throwing sliders to him and he was going to right field. He wasn't doing a lot of those this time.
No, none. Pete was just hitting every single one in the exact same spot, like 15 rows up in left field. And it just showed what a guy like Pete Alonso could do if he was able to hit in Coors Field on a regular basis.
Hot take, spin zone. The home run derby and Pete having a good performance like that, taking 100+ swings, hitting home runs, is going to make him have a hot second half. Usually people say it's going to diminish your play, but even Juan Soto came out and said, he goes, I've been hitting more ground balls than ever. I see the home run derby as a chance to take a couple hundred swings and try to hit fly balls, which I thought was super interesting.
Dude, 100%. I think it's probably like one of these narrative fallacies that every baseball fan holds dear. The home run derby can screw up your swing. Like, I'm sure it could. Like, if you really try to do it that much, like, you could develop a bad habit. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think we just kind of use it as a boogeyman when a guy has a bad second half. Like, Pete did have a bad second half after his home run derby win in 2019. But a big part of that was probably just because he was a player in his rookie year that the league was actively adjusting to. And while Pete did have a bad second half after that home run derby, the team had a magnificent second half.
And so Pete's bad second half was relative to how good his first half was too. Like, he still finished the season with a 900+ OPS. Like, it wasn't. Yeah, it was
50 home runs.
Yeah, but it's not like he, all of a sudden like fell off a cliff and couldn't hit anymore.
Yeah, the big one was David Wright. I think that was back in 2008 or 2009 when he just hit like 3 home runs in the whole second half of that year. But David Wright did have those weird couple of years in the middle of his career where the power just went away. And people like to blame things like the home run derbies. It's why religion has been so proliferated in the modern world. People like looking at things and being like, that is X is because of Y.
Need an answer.
Just don't think of the home run derby as a boogeyman. Pete's going to be great. If he's not great, it's not because of the home run derby.
No. And there was also another event this weekend in the MLB draft that I hated that it was during this weekend. I like when it's separate because it should be its own entity. Instead, they decided to do it during the futures game, basically.
MLB, we know how bad MLB is at marketing. They botched this weekend so bad in terms of like spacing out the draft, the futures game, and the home run derby. The draft and the futures game not only were going on while actual baseball was going on, but also during the Euro Cup final, which you mentioned before. Like, it was just kind of there was too much sports happening. And a draft on a Sunday night also just felt weird. Also during the NBA finals, I forgot that. So MLB is like, we want to highlight our young players, show off the future of our game during the 2 biggest events of probably the 2 most popular sports in the entire world at the same time.
Which is so funny too, because like this is the first year that they had like a real like draft room and getting people there. Like, they've always done it in like Secaucus at MLB Network, but now they got a space in Colorado. They had a venue. It felt like the first real proper draft, and they did it during the futures game. Like, what are we doing? Like,
how could you do that at the same time? Barstool Big Cat had a great suggestion. I'm going to steal his take right now for what MLB should have done. They should have had all 3 of these things on Monday when there were no sports at all going on and all the baseball games were halted. They should have had the futures game at probably 1 o'clock, 12:30 local time in Colorado. An hour after the futures game, they should have started the draft. So all of the guys, like the first 15 picks, could have had their shine. MLB Network could have had all of the coverage. And then as like the second half of the first round is going on, there's less notable players being drafted, less like hubbub going around. You start the home run derby and you interlude the home run derby in with draft picks. And also, I totally forgot about this with the home run derby. I was so excited that there was going to be a StatCast broadcast to go along with the regular ESPN broadcast. I thought it'd be a pretty cool to mix it up, taste differently, to listen to launch angles, exit velocity, see the distances, and they were coming out. And ESPN just made 2 half StatCast broadcasts instead of 2 actual distinct broadcasts, just with a few more numbers and graphics on one of them. Because they moved Eduardo Perez onto the regular broadcast, and they stuck Mendoza on the StatCast broadcast, meaning that neither broadcast had any identity, and they were both just regular ESPN broadcasts, with the exception of Petriello, because he kills it every time.
Yeah, no, Jessica Mendoza, I'll hold my tongue on that one. I think everyone knows my take with what I think of her as a commentator. But the draft, let's talk about that.
Yeah, draft.
Because the Mets had a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. First round, we talked about it last episode, but let's talk about it again if you didn't listen. We got Kumar Rocker, who is a generational type talent up until, these last few months. beginning of the year, he was a consensus number 1 overall pick. It was either him or Jack Leiter. Both those guys were considered to be aces, the next pitchers in the making. You talk about some of the most hype pitching prospects of the recent years. You're going Strasburg, who's, the best one of all time that you can think of. You got Walker Buehler, who'd been drafted recently. That was highly touted. Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter both go up in that category. And we got lucky where Kumar, what were you going to say?
I was going to say your boy Kyle Wright, Vanderbilt great.
Yes, Vanderbilt great. Yeah. No, Vanderbilt's a friggin' factory, man, for just pros. But Kumar Rocker was that guy. And as the season went on, people started to find more and more, I don't want to say like holes in the player or holes in the cheese, Swiss cheese, but people started to find more and more issues with him. And he got a little bit tired as the season went on. His velo had been all over the place, caused him to drop. I'm happy he dropped. I couldn't be more pleased he fell into the Mets' lap at number 10 because it feels very nearsighted to see like 5 starts of a guy and say those are big problems, as opposed to seeing the entire makeup of this guy's career and being like, well, he's like 6'7" or whatever he is. He throws 97, 98 miles an hour with a great slider curveball. Like, he's an absolute beast. He's got incredible stuff. I couldn't be more happy that he fell this far. I couldn't believe that the Mets had the opportunity to get Kumar Rocker at 10, and I'm so glad we took him. Big shout out to everybody being a little bit too, scared to take him, and that they didn't want to pay him the money that he wanted.
Definitely. One little tidbit about one of the teams who we thought was scared to take him. This was a draft rule I never knew.
Me either. I found it out yesterday. Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Unbelievable. Really savvy. Kumar Rocker was drafted after high school, so that would have been 2019? 2018?
I think 2018 or 17, one of those years.
Yeah, whatever that was. By the Colorado Rockies, either late first round, early second, somewhere early in the draft still, but people are very aware that the Rockies' pitching development is not really top of the line. I think you're probably getting much more out of a couple of years at Vanderbilt than you are getting from a couple of years in the Rockies' lower minors, especially a couple of years ago when player development even lagged a little bit behind where it is this day in the present right now. And when you're drafted by a team and you decide to go to college instead, you and your agent hold the right. And that agent is Scott Boras for Kumar Rocker, which I also learned, which makes sense why you got so much money. You and your agent hold the right to bar that team from drafting you a second time. And they did so with the Colorado Rockies on Sunday night, which I thought was an unbelievable tidbit, something I never knew happened.
Unbelievable. A little bit of information that I heard for the first time, just as you did, and I've been getting into the draft a little bit more. I also think what a friggin' move by Scott Boras there to no Rockies, because he knew the Mets were going to get him. Apparently, They had the Mets circled. This is where we want to go. We want to be on the New York Mets. The one team that scared them was the Kansas City Royals, who took a huge reach on a kid, Frank Mazzucato from Connecticut. I can't wrap my head around how they took him number 7 overall, but I wish the kid the best. I hope he does great. We got Kumar Rocker. I'm happy.
We had this conversation, mentioned it last episode, but literally on the terrace, like a couple months ago. I was like, I think the Mets might actually get Kumar Rocker. You're like, yeah, I think they actually might too. And it's kind of weird that we got to this point. But I was going to talk about this in our prospect report, but I think we're just talking about Rocker, so we should have a nice little Rocker segment right now. Yeah. There are some legitimate concerns with him reaching his ceiling. And this ceiling is an ace. I think Kumar's floor is a fine starting pitcher. Some guy who mixes in the rotation, eats a ton of innings, has a big frame, big body, and he does great for you. When you're picking from the 10th slot, just getting a rotation piece is a win. And we have chastised the Mets for the David Peterson scouting and selection a couple years ago, but it still is a win that this guy's made to the major leagues and already killed 150 innings, whatever it's been. And he does have more stairs to climb. But the one issue with Kumar that a lot of scouts have called to concern is the shape of his fastball. Now, I've talked about this a lot on this podcast throughout this year, that you kind of want to see guys with a fastball that rides. And the fastball that rides means it has a lot of backspin, and it gives the illusion that it's going up as it reaches the batter. Really, all that means is it's not dropping with gravity as most other pitchers do, but the ball spins so much that it gives the illusion that it's rising up through the strike zone. Kumar doesn't really have that. Kumar's fastball has some arm side run, which means as a righty, his fastball will kind of just cut ever so slightly in towards the right-handed batter. Do you see the same thing as me in the scouting report, right?
Yeah, I have not heard as much about the run being an issue, but more so about they don't like the shape of his fastball, which you've been saying. It doesn't rise. That's the one thing. And while watching Kumar Rocker as the season goes on, even when he's pitching well, his fastball is the pitch that gets hit. It's
100%.
It's weird because it's a good pitch. Like you throw like he does with that size, it's a good pitch no matter what. But there were good hitters at the college level. Like there's this guy Tyler Black who got drafted in like the compensatory round by the Milwaukee Brewers out of Wright State, who caught my attention because he smoked a Kumar Rocker fastball early on in the season. So it's hittable. But I feel like if there's any place to come with a fastball that needs a little help, the New York Mets is a great spot.
100%. That's where I was going to go with this. Now, because a lot of people have talked about how long it's going to take Kumar Rocker to reach the Mets, and I saw our friend Joe DeMayo put his expected arrival in 2022. I think if you want to get the most out of Kumar Rocker, we as Mets fans need to be patient and allow that fastball to develop in a way that can make him legitimately one of the best pitchers in baseball, because that is inside Kumar Rocker. That's possible. I think he's been a little bit worn down because he's thrown tons of innings over the last 4 years. End of high school, he won a College World Series already at Vanderbilt. He threw some crazy long games. He crossed the 100-pitch threshold a lot before he turned 21, more than most kids do. And his velocity has taken a hit because of that late in season, especially this most recent one. He looked so mortal this College World Series. It seemed like he was a completely different guy than back in 2019.
I think it's fair, too, because you mentioned Vanderbilt. Like, they go deep into the College World Series every year. It's like the LeBron James effect in basketball, where like he's played like an extra 3 or 4 seasons because of all the playoff games. Kumar Rocker's pitched a little bit more because of all the postseason games with Vanderbilt in the College World Series. And you talked about this with pitchers just in Major League Baseball, that they're going to hit a wall at some point because they didn't get that full season. Kumar Rocker's going to be in that same boat. He didn't get the full season last year, so he's pitching on a little bit of a weaker arm than he normally would have.
Definitely. And we even saw Jack Leiter have a midseason swoon this year, and it didn't affect his draft prospects similar to Kumar. And it is very important that, like I said before, the Mets fans are patient, because besides the slider, I'm assuming that the Mets go into his repertoire and basically redesign every single pitch.
Well, the curveball is good. The slider and curveball are two like good pitches. Yeah. Like the slider is, I think, the best pitch that he has. That's why I'm gonna be.
Slider is incredible. Yeah, it's
nobody touches it. Nobody hits it, and the curveball is really, really good too. Changeup only works because it's his 4th pitch. It's his worst one, and you still have to be wary of 97, 96, wherever he's coming at you with. But they're definitely going to do some retooling with him. The mechanics, which is really nice to hear, aren't really a problem, because you can get a big guy like this. He's 6'5", 245. You get worried about the mechanics. Pretty clean mechanics, not much to tinker with there. But we have a guy that has such good guts. Again, like top 5 talent, arguably in this draft class. Arguably one of the top college pitchers in the nation. There's so little that you really have to fix. It just feels like people saw bigger holes than might have really been there, because it's like when you see, was it like the veil was taken off of Kumar Rocker because he started to get hit a little bit. So I feel like people were trying to find problems when in reality, they're ignoring all the stuff that's right in front of their face and being like, this dude, you don't find this often. Like he's getting like the best MLB comparison that I've seen relatively, because it's hard for a lot of players. Noah Syndergaard with the kind of stuff that he had, like throws hard slider, all that kind of stuff.
And the Syndergaard comparison is actually good, because Syndergaard has had trouble creating ride with his fastball as well. And we've already seen that Syndergaard can be very good, but without the fastball with elite ride, with that perceived rising action, you kind of limit your ceiling. We saw that with Wheeler while he was on the Mets. You see that with guys like, I wrote in their notes, like Joe Musgrove, Framber Valdez, our guy Tyler McGill, and another guy, Alek Manoah, who just recently made his debut, who has a similar frame to Kumar Rocker. I think he's a tiny bit smaller, but he's like a thick boy. But these are all guys who have succeeded with multiple secondary offerings that they can rely on, especially Noah Syndergaard. We've seen his cutter, we've seen a slider, we've seen a curveball. There's a couple different types of pitchers that Kumar Rocker can become, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see where the Mets decide to go with his development, because it might not be linear. They might try, I'm sure step 1 with Kumar is going to be, let's get this 4-seam fastball going, let's get your active spin up, and let's make this ball rise. That might not work exactly well. His first couple starts, wherever he lands in the minor leagues, I don't even know, I kind of want to talk about that too, because he is older and much more experienced than most guys who are being drafted, but there's going to be some retooling happening here. So if you see some bad starts, if it comes over Twitter that Kumar Rocker walked 4 guys or gave up 3 home runs in a game, you have to have patience. You have to realize that there's going to be a lot of adjustments made with this guy, because this is like an unbelievable piece of clay we have. Top of the line clay. Like, you're hitting that pottery wheel and you're going to get like such a magnificent bowl as long as you just take your time, smooth the edges, use a little bit of silt, like get your hands nice and wet, and make something nice and beautiful out of Kumar.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about like where he could possibly start, there's a few ways. The Mets could get really aggressive. You could pull a Marlins, and you could start him in Double-A. That's what they did with Max Meyer.
Max Meyer.
And it's worked out beautifully. Max Meyer is tearing up Double-A to the point where if this was a Marlins team that's competitive, I would think Max Meyer has a shot to get called up this year, to be a guy out of the bullpen at least.
The Angels did the same with Reed Detmers, and it's going crazy.
And these are both college guys that threw big innings for their teams. Reed Detmers from Louisville, who was considered to be the best or second best left-handed pitching prospect in the draft last year behind Asa Lacy, who was the other guy I was going to bring up. The Royals put him in high A this year. He hasn't...
I like Emerson Hancock more than Lacy, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I was going to say, he's another one of these like really big dudes like Kumar Rocker, who like started low. You were talking about like, look at the performances that Kumar is going to have. Lacy not having great performances, but you still see the guts are there because he's still striking out like 15 batters per 9 innings because he has that kind of stuff. Kamar's going to be in a similar thing. Emerson Hancock, the guy you want to talk about, high A as well with the Mariners. Now they just have a absolutely loaded farm system, so it's a little bit different probably with them. But I would think that he's got to start in Brooklyn's our high A, right?
I would probably assume that. I think maybe St. Lucie, just because that's where the Mets have their training academy. So I think that it would just be logical to give him like a month down there. And then if he dominates or he at least shows the signs in the offseason, you put him right to Double-A next year. And if he does still need like a little bit more seasoning, then you send him to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I just think that there's going to be more work done with Kumar Rocker in the lab than on the field at first. And there's probably a lot of baseball fans that sounds kind of weird for, but this is the way the game is going. This is the way player development works now. And I think that Kumar will stand to benefit a lot from the type of like high level informational training that the Mets are going to give him.
You got to remember that we don't want Kumar Rocker to be where he's at right now. Where he's at right now, he'd be a very serviceable like starter at some point in his career.
Kumar could be a high leverage reliever tomorrow for the team.
Yes, but we want him to be that next ace, next guy to come up with Matt Allen and JT Ginn, who we're going to talk about in a little bit here. We want those to be the next three-headed monsters that the Mets got in the pitching rotation. So we gotta treat Kumar right. We don't want to rush him up. There's no reason for it right now. He's not needed just yet. Which leads us, I think, now into where does he go in the ranking for our farm system? Because we got Alvarez, Mauricio, Allen, Beatty, PCA, top 5. Where do you think Kumar drops in your eyes? I have an idea where I'm going to put him. I'm interested to see where you go.
For me, I'm ranking Kumar as our number 3 overall prospect and our number 1 overall pitcher, just ahead of Matthew Allen because I want to see how he responds to the Tommy John surgery, and ahead of JT Ginn because he's really only just starting to come into his own. And these rankings are always going to be fluid. These could be completely different at the end of just this season. But I think the combination of ceiling and floor on Beatty and Alvarez, and that just comes from being position players, especially Beatty, because I think those are the two who are going to be contested. Those are the two who are right there next to each other. Beatty, no matter what, seems like he's just going to be a very competent major league hitter who plays an adequate third base, and eventually now the DH is probably going to exist next season. Like, he will have a major league role very soon, and you can't really shake that. And his ceiling will be like a 35-ish home run power threat with an average that doesn't kill you. That alone right there, just that ceiling combined with floor, just will put him ahead of a pitcher who I think still has a very wide range of outcomes.
Yeah, it really depends. I think you're probably going to see it all over the place. I think MLB Pipeline's going to put him 2. I think that they're going to just, they love to hype up prospects, like especially draft guys in the top 10. They flooded the top 25 last year with top 10 guys last year. And I think that this draft class has some better arms sometimes. So I think Kumar will probably go to 2, and then Beatty 3, Allen 4. I mean, that's a pretty good top 4 right there, though. We're feeling good right now.
The Mets' top like 6 or 7 in just about 18 months has gone from something that we were like, to one of the probably more coveted systems in all of baseball.
It's interesting how Khalil Lee came over like from that Royals trade and went like right into number 7 to begin with, and this guy's probably going to be like outside the top 10 as the season goes on, just because like we have had so many risers and so many like additions and guys that we got more out of, which is always a great thing because we're so used to Mets prospects kind of just kind of shit in the bed a little bit. We're a little bit different now.
Desmond Lindsay.
Oh, dude, don't even, come on, please. Why you gotta bring up Desmond Lindsay? You're gonna,
we gotta go through.
Eddie Coons, another big right-handed pitcher that turned out to be nothing. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, but there's a new age in Mets world, and another reason why we don't have to rush Kumar Rocker like some other teams might be doing with their pitchers, because we have money. We can go get pitchers. We'll buy a new pitcher. We'll buy 2 new pitchers. Doesn't matter. This isn't gonna be a free agency preview because we have a whole second half of baseball to play, but these guys are prospects for a reason. Like, they need to develop. They're not finished products. Besides, like, maybe Jack Leiter will probably be in the major leagues next year. It's going to take a while. It should take a little bit of time. If it doesn't take a little bit of time, that means he's just so sensational that we can't hold him back any longer. And that'd be a great thing. But just don't think about Kumar Rocker for like 6 months. All Mets fans. I know you're going to want to. He's very popular. It's going to be on Twitter a lot. Put him out of your head.
Look how long it took for the Dodgers to call up Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, like a lot of those guys that are now like...
Urias.
Yeah, Urias. They babied him forever.
It took Urias 3 years in the major leagues to actually get near his potential that he's reaching this year. And he even like is like that big thick boy like Rocker. And him and Dustin May, they needed completely new fastballs to reach their potential. And you saw like a glimpse of it with May. You're seeing it to this entire season now with Urias. It takes a long time with pitchers. It takes so long with pitchers. Pitching prospects take 1 billion years to develop. Like literally.
Do you want to...
Jacob deGrom is reaching his ceiling at 32 years old.
Yeah.
He was drafted 10 years ago.
Max Scherzer's having his best season, arguably, at 35. Yeah. Like, the pitching is
Adam
so
Wainwright,
weird.
He's 40. Yeah, best season of his career.
Pitching doesn't make sense. All you got to know is that it takes time. It takes time. You got to let them marinate a little bit. You want to talk a little bit more about the prospects here, or what do you want to do?
Let's just do the other draft guys real quick.
Okay, yeah. And then some of the other draft guys that the Mets took, second and third round arms. It was a very arm-heavy draft. But we went Calvin Ziegler and Dominic Hamill. Dominic Hamill out of Dallas Baptist University, DBU. And Calvin Ziegler is a Canadian fella up north, but he went to like some school in Florida, I think, for high school as a prep guy. I know you were really doing your research onto these guys. I looked through them quickly. Hamill reminds me a lot of like how Lucas Giolito, Robbie Ray throws, real short arm action kind of stuff. Calvin Ziegler is a small dude, close to the ground, but he has got some thick legs and he uses them.
Yeah, Calvin Ziegler has what we call a strong base. He is 6 feet tall, 18 years old, and 200 pounds. That is a beefy boy for his age. So there's probably not that much growth left on his frame. So he's probably maxing out his velocities at right now, but he will sit the mid-90s and he can touch the high 90s. Both of these guys, Hamill and Ziegler, are analytical darlings. They're both high spin, high ride, high rise, four-seam fastballers, which the exact opposite we're talking about Rocker, we got with these two. There's no telling exactly how high they're going to go. Like, the secondaries are a question mark for both of them. Hamill does have 4 pitches, but I read a scouting report on Fangraphs that his slider and curveball, while having a lot of spin, look like basically exactly the same. But because they have so many RPMs already, small adjustments will probably allow them to move differently, become separate. He's a guy who's, while only throwing 92, 94 miles an hour, can be projected as a mid-level starter. And Ziegler's a guy I'm really excited about. He doesn't have really a secondary that he can hang his hat on right now, but the fastball is explosive. Touching 97 as an 18-year-old who has never, I don't know what the high school baseball scene is like in Canada. I'm assuming it's like not all the way like America.
I don't know what I know that there's actually a lot of really good baseball players in Canada. Like I want to say like the club scene, like AAU baseball is actually very strong up there. I don't know about high school baseball. That I know nothing about.
Yeah. But basically the fact that Ziegler only did have 1 year at like a real American baseball academy and he already has this type of these type of physical traits, I think is something Mets fans to be excited about. Both of these guys getting into the system at relatively young ages. There's going to be a lot of development to have there. Again, be patient, but I think that there's a good chance at least one of these guys hits.
I think what's really interesting about Ziegler, too, is that when you usually get these smaller pitchers, excluding Jack Leiter and like Bryce Jarvis and these kind of like different upper echelon guys, when you start talking about second and third round picks that are these smaller pitchers, you're usually not getting a guy who already sits in the mid to high 90s. Like, that's not something you typically find. You usually find a guy who's sitting 91, 92, really good control, 4 pitches. Ziegler's a little bit of a different mold here. He's a guy who throws hard, doesn't really have the control necessarily, and doesn't necessarily have those second pitches, but they like the guts of him.
Yeah, like the guts of him, and again, he has the fastball that we covet. One of the reasons that Jack Leiter boomed so much this draft season, along with all of his crazy stats, his skills, his stuff, his repertoire, he has that fastball. You don't have to do any development to that fastball, and you can just focus on those secondaries. If you're in the laboratory focusing on secondaries, it'll probably come as long as you're a hard worker and you're with a legitimate organization. Ziegler definitely seems like a hard worker, and the Mets are definitely a good organization. Same goes for Dominic Hamill. I was very excited about both of these picks. I think, especially because the Mets kind of had to shoot under slot because of how much money Kumar Rocker needed to be signed, these were 2 very high upside plays and allowed the Mets to really have what I think was one of the best pitching drafts in all of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets did something really interesting this year with their draft is, of course, like you mentioned, they had to play a little bit, I don't want to say safer, but as you mentioned to me before the podcast, they went after guys who almost had down years, but had been somewhat, I don't want to say coveted before, but people were interested in them before. Christian Scott, reliever out of Florida, really strong arm, not the best year. Florida baseball in general kind of just had a shit year. They got a lot of college arms. They took this guy, Mike Vassell, who the story was, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago when he could have entered the draft out of high school, got some really bad info and was like, don't take it. You're going to get more after you go to Virginia. Went to Virginia, didn't really perform that well, but he's got some stuff too. They drafted a lot of really big, strong dudes that are pitchers from pitchers out of college that at the absolute worst looks like they can make an impact in the bullpen at some point, like in the near future.
Definitely. And we have to give some credit to just the Mets scouting department because the last handful of Mets drafts have been unbelievably good. We've had a lot of talent coming through the system pulled from the drafts. I'm sure we've cleaned house in between, but I would hope there's been some holdover because damn, have we made some good selections in the middle rounds of recent drafts. And I don't know. I think there's a lot to be excited about. What was the Florida guy's name again?
Christian Scott.
Yeah, thinking about Christian Scott too. He is like... He's been a high leverage reliever in the SEC already. He throws mid to high 90s. He had not an awful year, but he really tailed off in the second half. This just seems like a great buy low opportunity. The same thing goes for
the Mets bought low. It feels like at every single pick almost. Like even Kumar, you technically bought low because he dropped to 10, and this was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick. The Mets took guys with the upside that we know that their pitching department can probably get out of them. But right now, their performance didn't necessarily show it just yet. And that's what we've been begging the Mets to do with just players in general, specifically you with Ryan Cordell last year. You're like, I'm just wishing the Mets would find some guys that do this one thing really, really well and try to make them into what they want it to be. Because stop taking like these old dudes that we know are on their last legs of their careers. Get the guys that do something well, something. And it seems like they picked at every single spot a guy that had something that made sense.
Definitely. This was a call to action that we've both been making all season, that the Mets are one of these organizations now who gets more out of guys rather than less. So you can take more risks. You can get more risky types of players. I just said the same thing twice, but I'm trying to really hammer home what I want to say. We're going to be able to elevate players for the future. So higher potential with higher risk is not necessarily a bad thing anymore with the Mets.
No, it's going to be really interesting to see how these guys play out. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on them, of course, because I love to invest in cards and check out how the Mets farm system's doing. And if any of them start to do well, we will keep you posted. We always do. Every midweek episode, we do our prospect report. So, make sure you keep listening if you're interested to see what these Mets draft picks are going to be doing over the next few weeks. A Mets draft pick from last year, though, who kind of went under the radar, JT Ginn, JT Tangeray, as you like to say, which I think is a fantastic nickname.
Me too.
Coming off Tommy John surgery, just looking really good. And I think this is why the Mets played it safe a little bit last year with their picks. Pete Crow Armstrong was a good one, but then they took some other guys for the absolute minimum so that they could pay JT Ginn. And it looks like it's going to work out so far.
It really does. And if anyone out there invests in cards, if anyone out there is in deeper dynasty leagues, this is the time to get JT Ginn because the hype train has just started to roll and it's about to leave the station. He's coming off the best start of his professional career last week at St. Lucie. He threw 6 innings, struck out 10 batters, no walks, no earned, only 4 hits. And most importantly, out of that entire stat line, he topped out 96 miles an hour, the hardest ball he's thrown all year. This is a stud in the making. He lost a year of development due to Tommy John surgery. The Mets took a gigantic risk. And it already seems like it's going to pay massive, massive, massive dividends. He has it all going on.
And I think this, to go back to the draft, weirdly builds into Gunnar Hoglund from Ole Miss being drafted in the first round by the Blue Jays. He got Tommy John to end the season, so he's going to miss an entire year as well, kind of similar to JT Ginn. Teams are not showing that they're as scared anymore about these arm injuries because we know this surgery is getting better and better every single time it's being done. You can find a nice diamond in the rough here, and the Mets might have done it with JT Ginn. He was really, really good in college, but the injury scared everyone. Now that he's healthy, we're getting that same player that people were freaking out about just a few years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And people do always say the first thing that comes back after Tommy John surgery is your velocity because guys are just so geared up and they want to throw as hard as they can. And that has now basically all the way come back with Ginn. It's crazy that we're calling him Ginn the whole season. His name was really Ginn, but I do just love JT Tangeray. That really rolls off the tongue as long as we can get that branding. I'd love if we could be sponsored by Tangeray. Wow.
Yeah, Tangeray, hit us up. Someone's got to be working for an alcohol company.
Yeah, us and Snoop Dogg. But the thing that he had been lacking, and we'd mentioned this on previous prospect reports, was control of his secondaries. He's a fastball slider guy. He's working on the changeup. I haven't heard that many reports of whether it be good or bad yet, but I'm assuming not because I haven't heard about it. Having these types of strikeouts with no walks in their game means that slider is there. It's active. Even in low A, you're not going to strike out 10 guys with no walks with a 95, 96 mile an hour fastball. You're still professional hitters. Some guys can at least make contact with that pitch. If that slider is doing what it does, like this guy's floor just continues to go up and up and up and up, and once that changeup comes along, 96 coming in, sky's the limit.
Doing really good. On the pitching side, I feel like that's kind of all we really got, though, from the minors.
That was all I had. It's been the pitching. We don't have that many great, exciting pitchers down low right now.
Which would explain also why we went so pitching heavy in this draft, trying to find somebody to take over.
It all makes sense.
Because all the notes here, the rest of it's hitting. Like Brett Beatty moved up to Double-A. He's still a beast. Vientos,
Monster.
blazing hot. I mean, we talked about them a little bit last episode. Those guys just continue to stay hot. And Vientos, thank you for getting hot at the right time, because I think you're on your way out. I think you're going to be a nice trade piece for us.
Dude, I think so too. Vientos, he has had such a torrid month that he actually now has the highest WRC plus in the entire Eastern League of any player 21 or younger.
That's so funny.
Jumped ahead of Riley Green, Tiger super prospect.
Yeah, Riley Green's a ball player. To be ahead of him.
He's a beast. And Vientos right now is a higher WRC plus than him, that's the composite hitting metric. That's the best way to judge you against your peers. And fuck, is he crushing the ball.
Crushing it.
Awesome.
Thank you for your service. I'll see you on the Chicago Cubs once we get Chris Bryant, because I think that's happening. Mauricio and Alvarez still in Brooklyn. Mauricio is cooled off quite a bit, not hitting like he was at the beginning of the year, but he's still such a big, like, gangly dude. I'm sure it's just a little bit of growing pains here. He's going to be a slow developer, it seems like, if anything.
Definitely. And I think that, well, you think it might be Vientos. I think Mauricio is the guy who has been handpicked to get moved. Just based on the simple fact of logic that he has not tried out any position besides shortstop this entire year. I figured if he was a big piece of the Mets' future plans after giving Francisco Lindor a 10-year contract, you're assuming it's not going to take Mauricio 10 years to develop.
Yeah, no. Not that slow.
No, you would probably either try him out at third or in the corner outfields. But given the fact that the Mets kind of have a glut now of these third base corner outfield types in the system, not really corner outfield because they're just going to start moving third baseman to corner outfield like Brett Beatty and Vientos, because now that they're playing together, Binghamton, the other guy has to play somewhere. Well, one guy's at third. And it just makes sense to play guys in the corners because the Mets are going to need some corner outfielders soon. Seems like Mauricio, the Mets playing him as shortstop is like somewhat of an audition for other teams to be like, this guy can still play shortstop. He does still have that top 20 prospect ceiling. He can be like a guy who fills out, becomes like a Corey Seager type, thick boy with good lateral agility. But the results just really haven't been there for him.
He's also like, despite not really playing that well of late, we know he started off the season hot because we were like, wow, there he is, finally. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's still got room to grow with that potential. Like his potential is pretty high right now. I think people are still super high on him. I don't think the Mets have to rush him out, though, when you have a guy like Vientos who, like, in all honesty, is probably not going to beat out Brett Beatty. I think it's going to be so tough for him to do that.
Oh, it would have to be Brett Beatty playing to his floor and Vientos playing somewhere near his ceiling to beat out Brett Beatty. Because even as good as Vientos has been, the strikeouts are always going to be there with him. Even during this massive hot streak, he's still striking out 22% of the time. Massive improvement for the guy. But striking out 22% of the time just for a stretch in Double-A means that you're going to have 30% K rates in the majors. You could win like that. Players do that. You could be useful. But Beatty's a guy who makes way more contact. The hit tool is far better than Vientos, even though it's still not elite. Mauricio still doesn't really have either. We've seen the exit velocities and we've seen the power for the first time in his professional career, but he's just not able to do that with plate discipline, with consistent contact. It's a very weird package Mauricio has. And something that should really just means that he stays at Brooklyn this entire season.
Yeah, and not that this should dictate any moves, but I feel like the Mets also don't have any shortstop outside of like Lindor and him. So like we got rid of Rosario and we got rid of Jimenez. Kind of need someone just in case. And it feels like I don't know, at least in my eyes, unless we're getting, I feel like someone with like legit control, it's not going to be Mauricio. Like I think the Cubs would happily take Vientos and somebody else for Chris Bryant at this point.
But the idea with Mauricio, the fact that it's taking so long, it seems like it will continue to take long. You're not going to see him in the majors for at least 3 years as is.
Ooh, 3 years. I think that might be tough. I think like, what are we in 2021? I think you can see him at the tail end of 2023.
Okay, so basically 3 years.
But that's also if he plays well. So I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. Like it's been 2 years running now. Mauricio has not been at or above league average in A ball between low A and high A, St. Lucie and Brooklyn. there's still a lot of development to go. He just can't seem to have plate discipline and power at the same time. Like, they go separately. Both can exist for periods, and he can hit the shit out of the ball. Like, you see those videos on Twitter, the exit velocity readings are very positive for what he has, but the putting it together is not doing it. It's not also doing anything for organizational depth at shortstop.
Yeah, true.
He's not a good enough defender to, like, make way at the major league and just figure it out for a few weeks. There's nothing that he can lean on right now. He is a complete high variance player.
He's a physical specimen.
He kind of is like in the O'Neal Cruz mold, or O'Neal Cruz is an exaggerated man of this. And O'Neal Cruz is walking 10% of the time this whole time. Brian Mauricio's allergic to walks. But it's just like, this guy's either going to be a superstar or it's just not going to happen. And at this point, where the Mets are as a team currently, I'm super chill with trading him if it means getting a legit piece.
Yeah, which it very well could. And I think the Mets front office has shown that they're very competent recently. If they're going to move Mauricio, I'm sure it's not for a rental and like Chris Bryant or something like that. I'm sure it's going to be a big piece.
It'll be like a Berrios or a Ketel Marte,
Byron Buxton.
Yeah, Buxton. No one's talking about Byron Buxton getting traded. I don't know why no one's talking about it.
I just think there's probably no shot.
He's gonna be walking next year anyway. I'll just sign him, I guess.
I think people also get a little scared about Buxton, where he's just like he's got glass bones. He's part of that group of
he does have glass bones.
A ball touches him and he's hurt.
It like most of his injuries have been freak things. He did have the hamstring early in the season, which you hate those soft tissue injuries. But there's just a lot of freak injuries. Like, sometimes you just put yourself in position to get injured, and Brian Buxton seems to do that time and time again.
It's like when Aaron Judge slides. He just can't slide.
Can't slide. Aaron Judge can't slide. Aaron Judge slides, he's off the next day. You got to be careful when Aaron Judge slides.
Some other prospects that we'll talk on here before we go into our Pittsburgh Pirates preview. Alex Ramirez, your boy, not doing so hot. In fact, he's doing pretty cold.
Yeah, he got really cold after he just got really hot. So it's kind of been like 3 different 10-game stretches for Ramirez this year where he was really bad, then he was like really good. Now he's really bad again, hitting under 200 with a 50% K rate in his last 10 games. Not great. It's going to happen. He's 18 years old. He is younger than Jason Dominguez, and everyone's like pissing their pants. He finally got called up to low A. Alex Ramirez is younger, everybody. He's younger.
Let's get on the Ramirez train.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see him sprinkle his way into some Mets top 10 prospect list. A couple people are MLB pipeline. See people starting to give him some credit there. Just remember, I had him first, and it's going to be good. It's going to take a very long time.
Yep.
Really long time.
No, he's a long way away. And Khalil Lee, maybe a little closer than we thought. He's stuck in that group of the 4A players that a lot of guys are in right now, where he tears up AAA and has seemingly actually no clue what to do at the major league level, as we saw in May. We know he's not that kind of player, but we also know he's not the player that we see in AAA. What are we going to get at Khalil Lee? I don't know. We do know he's a good glove, though.
Do know he's a good glove, and he has prodigious power. The home run he hit on Tuesday night in Syracuse, my God, he walloped it.
Wow. Crushed.
You heard that thing in Ithaca.
He's like got the Franchi Cordero syndrome a little bit, where it's like he does everything that you see in like a vacuum and you go, holy shit. But then you see the overall player and you're like, there it is. He swings and misses 50% of the time.
That's kind of been Mauricio too these last couple weeks. But God, you see Cordero's been working out there at first base of the Red Sox?
They're trying to find any possible way for him to get into a lineup, and
they're dying to get him up.
Well, they got Duran too, who's coming anytime soon. So that's another spot Franchi can't play.
Yeah, but we're not. This isn't a Red Sox podcast, it's a Mets podcast.
No, let's talk about the Mets. Let's talk about the Pirates preview. Let's go at it with that.
We talked this whole episode about the Mets minor leagues and Mets draft. We have a big second half coming up. We've gone 40 minutes about nonsense, basically. Let's talk about this team, because we are about to go the fuck off.
We have to. And we always, I feel like recently have been playing well in Pittsburgh. Like the last few times that we've been there, I feel like we smack them around because, well, they're the Pirates. Let's do that. Let's go in there and smack them around. We got our 3 best pitchers going. This is a sweep. We got a sweep here. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if we don't sweep, that's a bad series.
I agree with that, especially the fact that we've got to customize our rotation to have our 3 best dudes going 1, 2, 3. Stroman's pitching Friday. Taiwan coming off the All-Star game. As long as he's good, which he should be after pitching 1 inning, he's going to pitch